Okay, welcome to How Transactional Lawyers Are Adopting AI in 2026. This was a study that has been conducted the last couple of months, spearheaded by Law Insider and the large community that we have built at lawinsider.com over the past decade plus. We have a newsletter list of 350,000 plus, many of you whom are already a part of that community. Starting point, the demographics, 534 respondents, 75 countries across role. We did see a concentration in in-house and private practice, but we saw other legal ops and other categories as well. And then certainly the Americas, EMEA, were strongly represented. We saw the strongest representation in the US and the UK, but broad distribution. This is important as you're analyzing and benchmarking the data that we're going to be walking through today. Want you to understand who the participants were at a global level, because this very much was a global survey. In terms of legal team size of the participants, certainly a large concentration of both solos and small teams. And then also some good representation for larger legal teams as well. Adoption of tools that are reflected in the study. So I want to pause here for a moment. It's not the case that this is indicative of which tools are better or which tools are more adopted by a global legal population. This is all to say, among respondents of this survey, we asked, what is your primary legal AI tool? And then the remaining of the survey results, as we'll spend the next 30 plus minutes walking through, are a reflection of their preferred tool. So we look at ChatGPT, we looked at Copilot, we looked at Claude, we looked at SimpleAI, which is our tool, Gemini, Spellbook. So this is an indication of density of usage among the participants. Now, were many other respondents or tools that were selected by respondents, but that did not arise to a statistically significant number upon which we could arrive at any defensible conclusions about. I'm going to click over. I'm going to change user experiences just for a second. I'm going to show you what the live study looks like. So the study or the report that I shared a link of in the comments looks like this. And you will see as you go in, there's a section explaining the tools that were made available, or the ones that we analyzed, which are these 6. But we also will see if I can find it, an indication of the other tools that were selected: Luminance, GCAI, Juro, Proximity. We just didn't get enough concentration of these users to have made them a part of the study. So if you in fact use these, that's great. We'd love to get your feedback on them. We just didn't have enough concentration of usage within that cohort. Okay. Now, before I go into the survey results, I do want to show you the questions that were asked among the respondents. And so I'm going to flash this up now. I know this is a little bit difficult, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit. What best describes your role? Where are you located? How many lawyers are on your team? What is your most used AI tool for working with contracts? How frequently do you use AI when working with contracts? Which contract-related tasks do you use AI for most often? When using AI for contract work, where do you prefer to use it? How confident are you in the accuracy of AI-generated output? How disappointed would you be if you lost access to your preferred tool? And what feature or capability would you most like added, meaning you don't have access to it today? And then we asked, how is your AI access paid for? We're now, before I jump into the results, where we're going to spend the bulk of the next sort of portion, let's say call it 30 minutes, is going through the bulk analysis of the results of these questions. But before I do that, I am going to launch a poll for all of you to answer a subsection of these. I will then share these results back with all of you so we can see how the group participated. So the first question is, what is the tool that you use? And again, we're not using this for marketing or sales purposes. This is just to show back to you so the group can understand what's being adopted by the participants of the 111, I think, 112 participants in the session today. How frequently do you use AI? This is specifically for contract work, right? So this is drafting, review, third-party review, summaries, translations, etc. How disappointed would you be if your preferred AI tool, so this would mean if it was ripped out of your hands, if your CIO said you couldn't use it anymore, how would you feel about it if you lost it? And then which contract related tasks do you use AI for the most often? And then finally, how confident are you in the accuracy of AI generated recommendations from your preferred AI tool? So we'll leave this open for another 45 seconds. I'm going to check comments as they're coming in. There's 140 participants now in the webinar, so the numbers went up, which is great. But if as many of you as possible can participate in this, we will flash the results and then we will jump into the results of the study. Yeah, sorry, Charlie, no option for none. That's a good call. We should have added that. Yeah, Jacob, it's a great point. So we've had steady participation throughout. We of course started the survey at a point in time where a lot of things changed, but also we saw an influx continuously throughout that period. So we are going to reinitiate the study in the beginning of the fall, and we'll see how much the results have shifted. I'm reading the questions as they're coming in. Jacob, yeah, that's super interesting. Very interesting to hear. And it also seems like within your firm, you've enabled and given a lot of autonomy to individual lawyers to pick the tool of their choice. Um, yeah, hi Tundi. Yeah, we'll reshare the actual survey artifact in just a moment. I know it's the thread is getting crowded, so it's hard to track. Um, Yeah, Jacob, nothing, it's never moved so fast. So we like point in time surveys, but they're inherently flawed because the world is moving so quickly. Okay, we're going to leave this open for 10 more seconds. So this is the countdown. Oh, Dory just closed it. That's great. Dory, let's go ahead and present the results. Um, Okay, so we have ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Microsoft Copilot, and then lesser adoption down quite a few others. So sorry if for those who are interested in dropping in the names of the other that they're using, feel free to drop those in. GCAI, thanks, Ryan. Um, yep, great. Co-counsel, Case Fleet. Yeah, awesome. Thanks, everybody. Okay, what else do we have here? How frequently do you use AI when working? Multiple times a day. Awesome. So this is sort of consistent with some of the results you'll see in the survey today, all the way to multiple times a week, um, once a day. Great. Number three, how disappointed would you be? Very. So it looks like 90, 89% are either very disappointed or somewhat. A few of you are pretty apathetic. But yeah, almost 50% would be very disappointed. That's a very good sign. And then which contract related tasks do you use AI for the most? Drafting came in at number one. That's interesting. Yeah, so I think that we are used to seeing more of a contract review use case, but it's great to see so many of you are using it on the drafting side, summarizing. Yeah, so this is really great. And then last but not least, how confident. This is a big theme you're going to see in the results as we talk about these today, but we see very confident. Only two of you indicated very somewhat. It's a very lawyer answer, right? We're not very confident in anything, right? That's why we're lawyers and that's why we scrutinize so much. But interesting that 55% of you said somewhat, and then it went down from there. Okay, thank you for participating. We are now going to jump into the results. So, as I mentioned, we asked very similar questions, but a few more of the questions we just shared with you in the poll. How frequently do you use? 179 of the 534 said multiple times a day, what does this tell us? It's no surprise if you're attending a webinar on AI-powered contract review, you are undoubtedly adopting these tools already. And what we're seeing, as I'm sure you are personally seeing, is that once you start bringing these tools into your work, they become indispensable very quickly. We can debate quality, we can debate frontier models and updates and whether Claude is beating OpenAI and et cetera. But the fact is, it's hard to imagine a world where we'll stop using AI altogether in this category of work and probably in any aspect of our lives, but certainly in contract work. Okay, vendor level analysis. Among the tools surveyed or in the results, for the question of where is the usage or how frequently, Claude, SimpleAI, and Spellbook were high, but guess what? These are all very high. So there's no sort of clear outlier that says that, some tool is, being broadly used, but only being used once a month or once a week. We're seeing multiple times a week, at least all the way to multiple times a day. So this signals obviously a new trend. Talk about indispensable. These are things now that are woven into everyday aspects of our work. Chat versus Word. We didn't actually love the results of this question. We were sort of hoping or curious what that outcome would be to see if there was a skew. But the fact is that when we dove deeper into the data, the surface area that you use is largely dictated by the tool that is your primary tool. But it's typically not the surface area that drove the decision. That can be debatable for some of you, but a lot of adopters it was given to them by their CIO. It was a partner level decision, et cetera. And so if it's a chat environment, that's where you use the tool. If it's a chat and a Word environment, maybe you use it in both. But there wasn't a ton of insight, unfortunately, other than to say there's sort of broad preference in terms of chat environment, which is sort of browser based versus Microsoft Word integrated or other. Happy to hear comments or perspectives on this for those of you who feel strongly that you're only living in one environment or another. Would love to hear that, as well as if there's others of you who are using both. I think that the use case that we see is that the drafting environment tends to be a bit more spacious in the browser, right? You have a whole window to create drafting projects, to upload multiple drafts, to create a new draft, but it gives you lots of real estate to do that versus a Microsoft Word integration, a Word add-in, which is more narrow in size and therefore is maybe quite wonderful for redlining or contract review, risk analysis, but not quite as spacious for drafting an entire new agreement. So open to hear feedback on that. But I think generally we see not a ton of insight, but a lot of sort of mixed opinions on what is the right platform. So in this first set of questions, browser chat remains the leading preference overall, but not by much. Word-based AI review is close behind, not a niche use case. I think as Claude is improving its Word add-in, as Microsoft is perhaps improving theirs, we'll see there could be that starts to skew, because I think inside Microsoft, for many of us, until AI totally displaces Microsoft Word, we'll see, is going to be a place where we prefer to have our AI tools. Legal ops and in-house users show stronger demand for AI inside document workflows, meaning inside Microsoft Word. This makes sense to me. The repetitive nature of like redlining or playbook application tends to lend itself to Microsoft Word, tends to lend itself to corporate legal departments, in-house and legal ops. And then conversely, solo users lean more toward browser chat, suggesting flexibility still matters, and consistent with my comments before, suggests that drafting work, which solos are often in the business of doing, tends to have a better environment inside chat. Open to debate. So if your position is that you disagree with that assumption or that conclusion, would love to hear it. Okay, confidence. This is a big one. How confident are you in the accuracy of AI generated output for your contract work? I asked all of you this question. I think only two of you said very confident. in our study, in our survey as well, we saw a very low response rate for very confident, and we have some work to do there, right? So when you think about the nature of this, so you juxtapose very confident at 36 all the way back to daily use, which is many of you, the majority are now using this at least once a day, if not multiple times a day. That is a little bit of a conflict, maybe. It's certainly notable, right? So the idea is that something is being ingrained, or as I said, indispensable in our from our day-to-day work. It's something we use maybe as frequently as email, but the results don't give us the same level of confidence. I don't think you would have said this about, shepherdizing in, Lexis 2 years ago, right? I think there's plenty of things that we do that are accessible tools in the course of our work as lawyers that we feel very confident in. And we still have a very big chasm to cross to increase confidence. Because I think what we all want for a tool that we're using with this much frequency is for it to be producing higher confident outputs. Now, not surprisingly, now there's bias in this, right? So, SimpleAI is our tool. And so, of course, like, hey, look, this is great. But I think the insight is not that SimpleAI is on top. It's that it's two things, is that none of us are high enough. So not SimpleAI, not Spellbook, but also that the purpose-built tools, and only two are on this report, and that is SimpleAI and Spellbook, that those two had the highest results. And I don't think that that's a surprise because these tools tend to be more rigidly configured for, in this case, contract review, where you can build playbooks, you can build precedent-based review. And I know for many of you, you are becoming Claude experts and OpenAI experts, and you're going to, argue that you can do all the things, and every other purpose-built legal AI tool is going to go out of business. But barring that for just a moment, the idea that confidence is higher among purpose-built AI is not surprising to me, and I suspect it's not surprising to you. Even if you don't necessarily agree with that in your own work, you could imagine for the global population of transactional lawyers adopting AI, that purpose-built is creating better outcomes because the outcomes are more reflective of the configurations of the user or of the legal department that has set that tool in motion. Okay, I'm going to read this slide. I'm going to just do a quick recap, and then I'm going to go to questions. And we're about halfway through here, so I just want to do a quick pulse check to see if there's any heated debates or any questions that I should answer. Very confident users are still the minority, something we all have to work on. Most respondents are neutral, somewhat confident, or still evaluating, so we still have work to do there. Even the highest scoring tools stay below 20%. So this is an area that we think about a lot. Like, we have ground to cover. I'm sure Spellbook feels the same. I'm sure Harvey and Lagora feel the same too. And then trust is where the market still has the most room to mature. I think that this is where there's the most work to be done. My opinion, having spent a lot of time thinking about bringing context and precision into legal AI tools, is that trust is sort of the holy grail. It's what we're all aspiring to. I also don't think it's a binary. I don't think you just one vendor has it and others don't. I think it's a continuum. And I think that they're pretty much in all cases, it takes work. For those of you that are familiar with the software platform Glean, for example, I think what you'll hear from large teams that use Glean is that if you give Glean too much information, the quality of the output decreases. I'm just using it as a non-legal example because I think it's one that many of us are familiar with. But the idea that it's still garbage in, garbage out. We still can't just give it every contract we've ever reviewed and said, "This is my brain. Now give me a more intelligent AI tool." It requires configuration. So I do think that the room we have to cross as it relates to getting to higher trust, whatever tool you use, is going to be a reasonably long road for every tool and for all of the buyers of those tools. So again, that may be a topic for debate, but that's how I see it. I'm going to jump over to questions now, and before we jump into the next set. I'm going to jump into your questions before I jump into the next set of questions in the report. Um, yeah, and sorry, hopefully everyone can see my screen okay. Yeah, Jacob made the comment that confidence depends on the nature of the output. Obviously, we've narrowed the scope of this study to contracts. We've seen that, as we'll see in a minute, the majority of users are using these tools for both drafting and third-party contract review. And so, what does confidence mean in the realm of drafting and review? Just those two questions alone. Drafting, you would say, is this market based? Is it based on the templates that I gave or created? So there's this question of what does it mean for AI to create a trusted output of a draft of either a clause or a full agreement? And then for a contract review, you would say, how confident are we in its ability to either propose a red line, either based on market data, internal precedent, or internal rules, policy, aka playbook. So it's a good qualifier, Jacob. I don't think that this. I think that there's a question in litigation or in case law. There's this whole other set of criteria of concept of case law hallucination and other that I think is outside the scope of this survey because it was more focused on transactional work. But those are good questions. Um, uh, that to me is high confidence. Okay, yes. Yeah, Jacob, agree. And so I'm sorry if I can ask Jacob a question. Appreciate your engagement here. Are you saying that you're more doubtful about summary quality? Because I think generally AI is pretty good at summaries, but I'd love to sort of know where you sit on that question as it relates to summary quality. Um, um, Tratira uses Spellbook. Um, Oh, chat function before the word version, about 75/25. Okay, so she's speaking to sort of her mix of adoption or sort of which environment. Okay. Uh, More doubtful on scratch text. Got it. Okay, that's great. All right, good. We're going to keep moving. Feel free to ask questions here. I'll also be monitoring the Q&A. I know there's two, Zoom's always confusing because there's two environments to engage. So feel free to use either and Dory and I will keep tabs on both. Okay, how disappointed would you be if your preferred AI tool for drafting and review was no longer available to you? Um, what is this question? Why is it here? Uh, in previous world, we had this concept, we still have this concept called Net Promoter Score, what's often referred to as NPS. It's a question that all of us have answered. You know, when we went to flowers.com to buy a bouquet of flowers, they hit us with the survey. These things are, Nike.com, wherever it is, it's would you recommend this product or service to a friend or to a colleague? And it's a score of 0 to 10. This is a different version of that, which is designed to measure product market fit, of how indispensable a product is, and the benchmark generally, and this is often referred to as the Sean Ellis test, is that anything above 40% is in the category of strong product market fit. And so this is not a surprise, but it's another metric to look at in terms of how we think about both general purpose and and purpose-built tools, is that all of them minus Copilot are in the category of really strong product market fit, meaning the majority of users, or 40% plus, said that they would be very disappointed if they lost access. So I love this question in particular, because it's a much stronger signal. As someone who builds software for a living, I'd much rather know how you feel about what would happen if you lost it more than whether or not you'd recommend it to a friend, because it's a stronger signal of what it means to you personally. Maybe you don't want to share it with a friend. Maybe you don't have any friends that need a tool like this. There's all sorts of ways to interpret the NPS, but I love this one. And I think, the insight is just across the board. The tools are competing for higher and higher stakes or higher and higher percentages in this category, but they're all very high as is. Okay. Um, Yeah, and sorry, it sounds like a few of you are not able to see the screen, but hopefully the majority of you can. Okay, here's where it gets interesting. How are teams using AI for contracts? So if you're on this webinar today and you are sort of earlier in your journey, it sounds like many of you are power users of these tools already. But I think even for those of you who are power users, there's probably areas that you would sort of self-admit that you haven't brought AI into your work yet, for a host of reasons, maybe some good reasons, maybe just you haven't had time. But here's the ranking of among the 500 plus participants, where they're using it the most. Drafting was number one. Reviewing third-party contracts came in at number two. Summarizing number three. So I think in the chat, this is sort of consistent, both in the chat and in the poll that we did at the start of this webinar. These seem to be similar categories, with all of you. I would invite, and sorry, Amy, that you're not able to see the slides. You will see, we will give you access, to the slides. And in fact, if Dory wants to reshare the study, you can follow along with the numbers, through the link that she's going to provide. But in any event, I think that would love to hear other use cases in the chat, for those of you who are power users of any AI tool, something that's not listed here or something that is maybe beneath one of these categories. Maybe you're M&A focused and you're using it to produce, LOIs, or you're using it as to create sales agreements based on LOIs. Any sort of use case that you want to share with the group that you think would be, sort of interesting, that others might learn from, feel free. Due diligence reports, love that. That's a great one. Translations. Laura, would love to know, is that, just if I can ask, is that from English to another language? Is that another language into English? And I know that this is maybe a very basic question. What is the purpose of the translation? I know that there's the concept of legal translation as a category if we just need this in a different language. But in some cases, we're translating so then we can redline or then we can review. Would love to know what your translation use case is. Um, um, Hold on. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for just a second because I saw another question come in from Jacob. I just want to make sure that everyone sees what I'm showing now is how are teams using AI for contracts. So hopefully that's what everyone is seeing. I have also the full report, which is here, which you all now have access to because Dory has shared it in the comments. You're welcome to click through this, but this is different from my compressed version, which is what I'm using for slide presentation. It just makes it easier for me to walk through. Okay. A conclusion of the last few slides, AI is doing the production work. The judgment layer is still underused. And so what we mean by this, and this is perhaps for us what was the most compelling part, of the study, was that the relationship or assumed relationship between how you're using AI, like what your most popular use cases are, and how much you trust the output. We triangulate these results, and it points to this idea that for many of you, I won't project this on you, for many of our study participants, and perhaps some of you, AI is largely still being used as an off-the-shelf, unconfigured, or very little configured tool for your contract work, which means that the nature and the tasks that you're using it for are less reflective of your specific client or your specific corporate in-house team, so your corporation. And so, as a result of that, how you're using it is more general or more generic in nature. And we think that this correlates to also the nature of trust, because we think the more that the output looks like you and mirrors you, the more you're likely to trust it, right? Because it's giving you recommendations, it's flagging issues, it's proposing red lines, it's identifying risks that are not general, it's not general recommendation, it's not general risk identification, but it's actually things that are specific to how you run your legal department, how you run your business. So I think that perhaps for us is the biggest insight. But this is also the hardest to do, right? So, we as vendors, we want to be like, oh, it's easy to set up. You'll get there in no time. No problem. But the reality is, just like in legal ops for the last 2 decades, it's always harder than we think it is to automate a system or to automate a contract. So too, is it harder than we'd like it to be or than we think it is to configure an AI tool to mirror our behaviors to then yield that higher trust output. So I think it is a little bit of we all will over time invest more in the configuration and setup of the tools so that we can use the software in ways that right now we may not feel comfortable, or that we may just say, this is not a sufficiently tailored output, so I'm just not going to use it. I'm not going to use it for drafting, an MSA because it doesn't know my MSA preferences, and therefore starting with one of these drafts is not helpful. It's not actually saving time for me, just to use that as one example. Okay, AI adoption is highest in drafting and review. That's where it's being used most heavily. Drafting, third-party review, summarization, extraction, and red lines are the dominant use cases. Adoption drops when the task requires institutional knowledge or legal judgment. That's the main point I was making on the previous slide. So this third bullet is really the strongest theme. And the next opportunity is connecting AI to market standards, internal precedent. So what have we agreed to in the past? Playbooks and fallback positions that's consistent with sort of mirroring your behaviors. One question I would have for the group, and the survey didn't really get into it, but I know some of you, maybe half of you, maybe less, because this is in-house connect is the large group. So maybe this is just strongly an in-house audience, but I'd be curious if any of you are either fractional GCs or are solos or small firms, if you have a different point of view as it relates to configuring institutional knowledge or legal judgment, because in a corporate use case, we have things like internal policies and playbooks, hopefully, and standard templates. In the law firm use case, our positions shift client to client, matter to matter. And so I'm curious if any of you have had good experience in the concept of tailoring or configuring to match the dynamic nature of sort of a multi-client environment. So hopefully that makes sense. And if any of you have perspectives on that, feel free to add to the comments. Okay, what do transactional lawyers want AI to do better? There's a few slides to cover here. We've divided these into a few categories. Would love to know which of these you're sort of plus one on, or which of the areas you think are most interesting to your work. Verification layer with source citations. So every recommendation links back to supporting statutes, regulations, cases, templates, or source material so that we're not getting blind recommendations, right? So anytime a recommendation is coming in, whether it's to add something, remove something, redline something, it's not just a do it because, but you're always seeing where that recommendation is based, what it's based on, and you can go do further investigation. We think that is maybe central, or the key to unlocking higher confidence is let me go verify. So it's not just me feeling in my gut if this is a good recommendation. Let me go try to understand how this recommendation came to be. Governing law aware review, recommendations adjusted based on jurisdiction and governing law rather than assuming a generic legal standard. This third one is unique. We have a lot of higher ed partners and customers. We see this come up FAR and DFAR. This probably could be extrapolated though into other use cases similar to this, where you have very complex federal policies, jurisdictional policies that are dynamic in themselves and require a degree of interpretation. So it's sort of like a playbook on steroids, but it's external. So it's an external set of policies that always govern a certain type of contract review, and the interpretation is slowing legal teams down. So we see some need there and an opportunity there as well. Okay, next one, playbook standards and market context. Playbook aware contract review. These tools exist. We do it. Spellbook does it. Others do it. But I think many of the general review tools, at least off the shelf, are not set up this way, but review contracts against a company's actual playbook, approval matrix, negotiation standards, clause benchmarking against market standards, compare clauses against market standard language, and explain why one version may be preferable. I think we're many vendors like us and like Spellbook have pushed in this area, but it continues to be one that is demanded of us because it's not enough to compare against your own internal policies in many cases, but you want to know sort of what's market type analysis as well. Um, Outside counsel collaboration, this is an interesting one. We saw a few requests for this in the survey. Makes sense that there would be collaboration. I think that I think Harvey and Lagora are pushing in this arena. But we see an opportunity here, and this request makes sense. Would love to know if others feel strongly about this. Review where the work happens, redline directly in Word with true track changes. So again, not all of the tools we've looked at today are Microsoft Word integrated. Some of them are newly there. Some of them still have some ground to cover. Matter management integrations connect AI to review tools like Outlook, iManage, Google Drive, and Slack. Interactive web-based drafting workspace, use a dedicated workspace to compare clause options, explore alternatives, chat with AI, and apply edits. This is interesting because I suspect, well, I don't know, I have a hunch that it is drafting-based AI interfaces get better and better and offer more and more capabilities that we as a legal profession will start challenging the stronghold of Microsoft Word. Maybe you all will disagree with that, and that's okay. But I wonder if it's so much easier to draft and it's so much smarter to draft outside of Word, that there's a world in which we'll start shifting in that direction. We'll see. Microsoft certainly has a stronghold. Context memory and negotiation intelligence. AI learns from prior reviews, accepted red lines, and drafting patterns to improve future recommendations. This is one that I'd love to get some feedback from the group on. We've heard this before. There was a lot of interest in this in the study. The question is the how, because the nature of AI learning assumes a sort of scoring rubric or mechanism whereby bad behaviors do not become the new standard, that we're not reverting to sort of a new median or a new norm, but rather it's getting smarter. And what smarter means in the context of a playbook, for example, where maybe we keep deviating from our choice of law, well, we wouldn't want our playbook to then rewrite to Delaware rather than New York. We'd say, no, no, no. Maybe we don't win New York as much as we'd want, but New York needs to be our choice of law by default. And so the idea of what contract memory and learning will be and how it will be applied, we do some of that. I know other vendors do as well, but that's this very complex topic that needs to be introduced in a way that has some guardrails on it so that you don't sort of lose control of your primary positions. Context-aware review, AI that understands previous communications, negotiation history, related contracts, and prior approvals. I think that that's great. Real-time negotiation assistant, AI suggests fallback language, negotiation positions, and responses during live redlining. I think a lot of tools do this today, but maybe not as elegantly as they might. Okay, we're almost at the end here. From one contract to a whole portfolio. So portfolio-wide contract updates, replicate a clause change across dozens of templates and agreements automatically. I think that this is great for in-house teams, so not just a law firm use case, but where maybe you have a new GDPR update, or maybe you have a new AI policy that needs to span across five or six, or an HR and gosh, our employee handbooks, or things that have implications across different states and other. I think the ability to push those updates globally is an awesome capability. Um, Being able to review and analyze bulk contract sets, so dozens, hundreds, thousands of agreements. So in the same way, we're using AI to do individual contract review to be able to pull that across a larger data set. Again, lots of tools do that today. but maybe a little bit harder in some of the general review tools, at least in a way that is consistently applied. And then contract review analytics. This is one that I think I'm really excited about because we've pushed heavily in this direction. But like the introduction of any new tool that gets well adopted, meaning you don't have to beg your lawyers to use it. Once they've used it, they tend to keep using it. That signals or delivers data back to the business, whether it's a law firm or corporate in-house team, where you can now glean insights. Some of the insights that we get most requests for are where are we accepting fallbacks or deviations from our standard policies that might warrant either a risk score of, gosh, we're operating in a negligent way or a high risk way, or may dictate an update to a template because we've taken a position that we're not, in fact, defending, at least not consistently enough, given how much time it's delaying deal cycles. And so, thinking about how we can give this insight back to businesses is something that we're spending a lot of cycles on, and I think other vendors are as well. I think that there's other insights also just with respect to volume, like how many NDAs are we reviewing, how many MSAs, how many DPAs, how many cloud services agreements, who's doing the bulk of the work, how long is it taking. These are things that we don't really have insight into inside Microsoft Word today, but through the adoption of tools like this, become great sort of and all of us are being asked like, what's your AI plan and how is it going, right? It's like, gosh, I need a plan, and then I have to report on the plan. Being able to report on it with data insights that are served up in a way that are useful to the business and sort of defending the ROI of the tool you've invested in, I think it makes sense. Is an area we should all be pushing toward. Sorry, there was one more. I lied. Intake to business ready output, automatic first drafts from email, executive summaries by stakeholders. Someone said due diligence summaries in the comments, clause by clause business impact analysis, explain commercial operational security, revenue, and leverage implications, not just legal risks. So yeah, going beyond just a legal analysis inside contract review, I think is another great one. And then compliance, of course, as well, of how this integrates into our compliance tools and how it can proactively identify risks that may not be a part of our playbook structure, but nevertheless will become critical in us assessing the health of the business or the health of our contract portfolio. Are there, or do we have vendor contracts that are lacking AI policies and data governance policies, et cetera? These are things that should be proactively identified as they get surfaced. We shouldn't have to implement new rules proactively. It should happen automatically. A recap of that section as we get to the end of our hour together. Top workflow priorities, accuracy, citations, drafting quality, workflow integration, redlines and comments, context controls and enablement, legal market context, risk spotting, UX, instruction following, matter memory, playbooks and fallbacks. Okay, that is what I wanted to cover. I'm going to ask my colleague Dory to reshare a link to the full study. This is the full study. The study is broken down into 8 chapters. We go into methodology and demographics, so you understand how the survey was built and the participants. It goes into the question analysis, which is where I spent the last 30 minutes. It goes deeper into vendor spotlight. So it will go into ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude, SimpleAI, Gemini, and Spellbook specifically in dedicated slides. And then there'll be some conclusions. We covered those conclusions today as well. So hopefully this was a good use of your time. Hopefully, as you are on your AI journey, this will be a resource that you can go back to and sort of either at the individual personal level, am I doing all the things I should from an AI adoption perspective? Or maybe you'll use it to help make a business case internally and say, gosh, the whole world is adopting these tools. Why aren't we? Let's look at what 534 transactional lawyers across the world had to say. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. We will send the slides, but better than the slides, I encourage you to read and share the full report, which Dory has just linked in the chat. And we will send out a recording of the webinar. and we will be doing more surveys in the next few weeks to go deeper, both as some of you pointed out, because the world is changing so quickly, we will re-ask several of these questions, but we'll also be conducting some new studies and new surveys that go deeper into other AI related topics. So that is it. Thanks everyone for your time today. Dory, thank you for supporting the webinar, and we will see you on the next event.